Morning. Welcome to the West Valley Center for Spiritual Living. I'm Reverend Karen Rice, and I am the senior minister here in the West Valley Center for Spiritual Living. And it's wonderful to be sitting in this chair, sitting on a really important message that I'm so eager to share with you. So much has happened in the last few months and the last few weeks, and I think that we're beginning to have an opportunity to see a brilliant vision, something coming on the horizon that's worthy, and we have been calling it forward. So before I dive into the message, which I think could be quite exciting this morning in lots of ways, I would really cherish the opportunity to ground myself and all of us in this sacred space of connection through the words of prayer. So I just pause and still my own mind, knowing that stillness creates this beautiful attraction for light, for love, and for peace. And we feel and experience the peace of God in this very moment. And I rejoice in knowing that it is in this sacred space that we call forward that infinite intelligence, the wisdom of the universe that is always available, guiding us, wooing us, holding us tautly in this beautiful, gentle, and sweet hold. And so this day especially, I feel held sweetly in the hands of God, as I know this is true for my community, and as I know this is true for everyone within the sound of my voice. I say, thank you, God. This time is blessed. I let it be, and so it is. And so, yet another Sunday, big surprise. I have something to say, something I'm feeling my own passion around. And I believe that the message this morning is a gorgeous complement, almost a sequel to what happened and what was expressed last week in the message. And I'm talking today, the title of the message is Shaken and Stirred, and I teased that phrase reminds me sort of a James Bond movie. And I decided that that's really apt because we're in a big story right now. And I wanted us to be able to look at not only how things are stirred up in the world, but I think the most important thing that needs to be acknowledged today is the way that each and every one of us is stirred in the inside, that our inner being has been shaken, and we are being called to wake up even more and more as every day goes by. And because we live in a universe that is alive, that has its own heartbeat, its own pulsation, its own breath, the in-breath and the out-breath, I think it's helpful to align ourselves to that wisdom, that we live in a universe that is forever and ever expanding. And in this way, we can really sort of rest peacefully in the unrest that we have been witnessing, knowing that it really is a greater call in this emergent evolution that Dr. Ernest Holmes spoke about so consistently. Ernest Holmes, if you're new to the teaching, is the founder of the science of mind, or the philosophy of religious science. And so this morning, I am inviting us to just notice our own personal and individual way that we have been stirred, or that we are shaking in that inner world of our own being, and that we exhibit that in a variety of ways. There are ways in which some of us, have a passionate call to do something. And I think that if you are called to do something right now in whatever way that is, then you need to follow that passion, because there's a divine piece of it that is a divine desire for things to look different on the planet. And there are others of us who don't understand what all the ruckus is about and wish everybody would just calm down. I keep thinking of the riots that happened in 1992. I was living in Los Angeles at the time. In fact, I had a daughter who had enlisted in the Army but had not yet trained. She was finishing her senior year of high school, and she was activated to go to the Armory in downtown LA and serve. And I remember later, that was a scary time for my family for sure, and this mother. But I recall Rodney King saying, "Can't we all just get along?" And so I think of that time as a wake-up call. And we woke up a little more than we had been. And now a lot of years have passed, decades have passed, and we're now in the middle of another very violent shaking that has reached to the core of us. So some of us are confused, some of us are feeling passionate, some of us are spilling over with compassion and tenderness for the sadness of it all. And what I want to say to you is that if you are still alive and living on this planet, whether you live in a cave and you never watch TV or social media of any kind, you are still impacted by what is happening, not only in the United States, but globally, around the globe. We are living on a planet that breathes and lives, and there is a vibration of change that in many ways we have been a part of calling forward. So just know that you are not exempt from having feelings of being stirred or shaken right now, or in any of the events in our country or in our personal experiences of living. That shaking seems to me another part of that way we are called to wake up in different aspects of our own our own story of our life, the lives that we're living. So I found this fabulous quotation from Dr. Ernest Holmes that I had chosen months ago to inspire me in writing this message, not, of course, knowing what would be going on in the world at the time, because it never matters. It always is given to me to know how to use what I intuited so many weeks and months ago. Ernest Holmes said these beautiful words that I find worth repeating. If you learn to think of life as flowing, seems to be the first step. That life is living, it's alive, it's moving, and it's flowing, always flowing through us, to us, through us, expressing as us. So Holmes says, learn to think of life as flowing through you and through your every action. For if you do, you will soon discover that the things you give your attention to are quickened with energy. The things you give your attention to are quickened with energy. And the important thing to hear in this statement is that it doesn't matter if it's the energy of godness that we're awakening to, or if it is the energy that is the opposite of that which looks godless. For we know on some level that God is never missing or limited, and yet there are things that just are so difficult for us to grasp in our understanding of this perfect order that God desires for us to experience. In evolution, the movement of life is always part of that purification process, that part of calling forward that life force that desires to expand. And I don't want us to lose sight of that. So life is flowing through us in any given moment, and whether you see the God or you see the lack of God is the energy then that you are magnifying in your experience of it, and also that energy that radiates out into the world. So these are always good things for us to look at. You know, it is in the nature of the way we are created that we are empathic. We have been created by a divine creator to have an experience of empathy, which suggests that there's nothing wrong with us feeling the pain that someone else is going through, because it is that pain that stimulates that greater ability to have compassion and share our love and to help in that healing process of each other. And I love that we're realizing empathy is not a diagnosis that needs correction, but that it's a gorgeous way for us to learn to stand in it in a more comfortable way. That it is uncomfortable to feel the pain of others, and yet there is a spiritual element of this empathy that keeps us safe. And so if you are one of those thousands, maybe millions of people who are aware, they are very empathic and are oversensitive almost to what's going on in terms of everybody else's feelings, it is important to learn to manage that and to learn to stand in a place of knowing your own personal truth, or that there is a greater divine truth that is always guiding us and comforting us at the same time. So that kind of grounding we're talking about is a huge, huge blessing. I think it is a way we are returning to love. And sometimes it's a lesson we're called to learn. This stirring and shaking is, as I said earlier, like this big alarm clock that's going off. And here's what I know to be true in my own life, and I'm pretty sure this is true for almost everybody. Nobody really wants to be startled awake by that alarm clock. That is an unpleasant experience, and even a gentle tone that I try and set my phone to is always like no, don't bother me, I'm sleeping now. And therefore, I think that actually explains why so many people have trained their selves, their physical body, to wake up just before that alarm clock goes off, because we don't like to be startled that way. And when we are feeling really heavy with sleep, like we'd like just a little more rest, it is so easy to reach out and hit that snooze alarm and get a few more minutes of sleep. But the unfortunate element in that is that the alarm then goes off again and again and again, depending on how much of that you can tolerate. And eventually we all get out of bed and we get in the shower or go have a cup of coffee, whatever way you start your morning. And then we realize, oh, it's so much easier if we just get out of bed when the alarm goes off. And I have been thinking that that's how it feels to me, that we have been hitting that snooze alarm for a long time, and it's becoming less and less tolerable to hear that harsh alarm of, no, wake up, there's more change right before us, and we get to participate in it because we're all a part of that journey. We're all a part of that story. So I find that useful to think about. I have a reading for you this morning. In my research for the talk this week, I stumbled on something absolutely magnificent. I'm reading again from The Essential Earnest, which is a book that was put together in 2002 by Reverend Jesse Jennings from, I believe he's from Austin, Texas. I love him. He's the guy that writes the Q&A in the back of the Science of Mind magazine, which, by the way, excellent time to renew your subscription to that magazine. I really feel devoted to it personally. But there's a place in this book where Reverend Jesse gathered or compiled some unprinted words of Holmes. And what I want to read to you today comes from something that Holmes said on the radio. It was a segment when he had a radio show that he broadcast weekly. It was called This Thing Called Life. This is a segment that was entitled Spiritual Armament. And it was written, or actually it was spoken, because it was broadcast, on August 6th of 1950. And at that time, the hot crisis was the Korean conflict. And he wrote some pretty direct words that are very useful for us to hear, because they can be applied to any conflict that we might be facing. But I want you to hear them this morning. These are the opening words. I'm only going to read the first paragraph as it's been transcribed. I want you to hear these words in the context of of relevance for our living today, because these are deeply principled words that came through our founder, a very bright man who was devoted to understanding all religious faiths and traditions and looking for the gem of truth in all of them. And it was toward the end of his life. So that tells me he had a greater wisdom than when he first began gathering information. So let's listen to these wise words regarding conflict. Democratic leaders in this and other countries have asked that we pray for peace, for everyone realizes that we and the world are in a period of great crisis. It is a crisis in which many feel can mark the beginning of a new united effort toward peace. Now, the over-pessimistic people are afraid that this crisis might lead to complete world devastation. Sound familiar? They are afraid, but those with hope and with faith should not feel this way. Rather, we should feel that this crisis can lead to something permanent and good, something which will make the world a better place and in which to live, and with individual and collective safety, personal liberty, freedom, and justice. Amen. A profound statement that is so filled with truth for what we're living in right now. I want to say a couple of things. First of all, I want you to notice that he speaks directly to a fact that was going on in that day. We can use those words for a fact that is going on in our day, but I want to point out that in a paragraph, he used the word crisis 4 times. And for me, that gives us that beautiful way we can cross that over now into anything that might feel like a crisis going on in the world or in our lives. And so I wanted to add that we as an organization, Centers for Spiritual Living as an organization, have been posting out the same types of messages for quite a while now. We actually have a committee called I can never remember it, the Spiritually Motivated Social Engagement Committee, that released a formal statement on racism in the United States last Tuesday. I will post this in the newsletter this week so you can read it in its entirety. A lot of prayerful thought went into this statement. But what I know is when any organization makes a statement that aligns to our beliefs, we get a little bristly about whether or not we agree with that statement. Does that represent me personally? And so I am inviting you to listen carefully or to read that statement carefully with an open mind as much as possible as you can open your mind, and then listen to the words I'm going to say after I read a little piece of this. Because as I played with this week, and I thought about you, and I thought about my obligation as a minister to stay current with what's going on in the world and to bring in the guidance of how to use principle through these things, we need to look at the congruence of all of it as a package that is complete. So in this statement written by our Spiritually Motivated Social Engagement Committee, they say this: we call upon ourselves and all faith communities in the United States to take action. That sounds very much like the words I just read that Ernest Holmes said in 1950, and probably in 1940 something, and probably in 1914 something, and any time there has been a great conflict. So we call upon ourselves and all faith communities to take action. Action that shows we have heard the cry of suffering. That, my friends, is compassion. Whether that action is prayer or rigorous self-education or active engagement, let us not let this moment in history pass unattended. We have been invited to pray, to do rigorous self-education, or to be actively engaged as you are called. And so that's what I want to look at in a really important way. How are you called? Do you know your place in all of this? And if you still have kind of a question mark around it, I think the rest of what I'm going to say this morning should help you clear that up in short order, so that before this message is done, you will be equipped to know where you need to stand, and you will also be open-minded and open-hearted enough to accept that others may have a different place in where they stand in this same way. So, first of all, I want to begin by saying something I've been saying all week, perhaps even in last week's message. What's going on in the world and the timing of the racial justice conversation we are having right now, worldwide, especially in our country, but worldwide, it feels to me like the alarm has gone off because it's happening in a perfect storm, that we were already homebound and isolated and shaken and stirred by something we have never experienced in our lifetimes before, and that and it's uncertain. The future, how we're going to proceed is in everything, even in how we do church in the upcoming weeks. All of that is uncertain. And so that made us raw enough, that made us open enough, almost like a wound that's open. And we're shining the light on that wound so it can heal, and it made it a perfect place for this other activity. What was going to happen, but this time we are giving it fuller attention. And so that's just sort of a ministerial, it might be a little overgeneralized, but I believe it is a perfect storm for us to wake up in a bigger way, and that we can use that in a very positive idea of how we're going to step forward individually as well as collectively. When we see, if you see disease on your plants in your garden or in a house plant, if you see dis-ease in a plant, you see it as a call for attention. It's a call to treat the dis-ease. Some of us will treat that by prayer and sweet conversation, and I might even touch the leaves of my plant while I'm praying it well. And others of us might get on Facebook and ask, what do you do when your plant looks like this or that, and solicit advice and get educated by people that have more expertise in that area. And others might throw the plant out, go buy a new plant. So we're all in choice. But the dis-ease and the recognition of it is what moves us to an action. And you are in choice as to what you do in the action. So storms come and go. Disease comes and goes. And what we do before a storm, if the newspaper says storm is coming, we're going to get ready. Right? What you do before the storm, what you do during the storm, how you protect yourself, and what you do after the storm when you begin to rebuild your life is up to you. But there's a call for action in it. So know your place. Number one, important thing I'm going to say three, but number one, know your place. Find where to stand, and then stand there and be clear about what you're called to do. So here's what's interesting. I think the social activists know exactly what to do. They've been called to do what they know they're called to do. I think the people that are protesting know exactly what they're called to do. And I think that everybody else is a little confused. And we're confused in lots of ways. We're confused in our own sadness or the hurt we're feeling of the world. We're confused by what we feel from the agitation in the world. Or we're just confused because we don't understand why everybody else is so upset. And I have something exciting to say about that. Don't turn away from that. If you are confused by the confusion, acknowledge that and see it as a call to prayer, a call for you to take action in your own way, to turn within and see why does that bother me? What does that come to teach me? How is this my edge of growth? And know, this is so incredible to me, but to know that you are part of the story and that you too have been called to be here right now and to walk through your experience in whatever way it's unfolding for you. You know, I mean, if you are alive now, let's face it, you are a part of it, no matter what. And I think that for the people who are staying home and not understanding others who are comfortable going out, even before the looting and the curfews and everything happened a week or 10 days ago, I think that there's something here for each and every one of us. I heard, at first this broke my heart, I heard last week that some expert somewhere predicted that about 20% of the population will never leave their home again simply because of the virus. That people have been frightened so much that there is a segment of our population that will never feel comfortable leaving their homes again except for the most necessary reasons. And so that broke my heart. That broke my heart because I think we need to get out. We need fresh air. We need the sunshine. We need vitamin D. We need to breathe other than the stuff that's in the walls of our home. We need companionship. We need to be together. And most of all, my biggest fear around all of that is that I'm afraid that that's the population that will also be glued to the news on TV, and they will begin to think that's what's going on in the world and that all of that is the real world. And so that's so harsh, that hurts my heart to even imagine that. And I was thinking, honest, this is a true story. Last Sunday, I went home after service, and I took a nap, and then at the end of the day, I took a nap because I was so tired from my vacation. And then in the evening, I said to Hugh, we need to watch the news, and he turned on the TV, and I don't know where he went, somewhere on cable or something, and the news on the TV came up 4 different news channels. Bam, 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 bam. And on Sunday night, things were hot all over the country. And so this little square up here was Washington, D.C., and this little square down here was Long Beach, California, and this was somewhere else, and all of it was horrible. There were fires and mean things happening and reports coming, and one of them was the Floyd family being interviewed, and I watched it, and I got deeper and deeper pulled into it, and it was so surreal to be looking at bouncing from 4 screens and not understanding why. And I really believe it was a great accident that happened for me to have this experience. I said to my husband, I know several people that are on the road right now, snowbirds returning to where they spend the summer, and I'm afraid for them. And my husband, who is not a minister, said to me, honey, look what you're watching. And he pointed to the TV, and the 4 screens of violent interactions or sad things happening. And he said, you're thinking in this moment all of that is the only thing that's going on in the world. They'll be okay. And I'm so blessed to live with a human that knows me so well that in an instant he could pull me back to go, oh my goodness, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. I can pray, I can treat, I do not have to worry about the safety of these loved ones, right? I can use that power that's greater than I am. And then I had to take my nose away from the news because I recognized it wasn't doing me any good. So I have been worried about that 20% of the population. And when I sat down to write this talk, the Holy Spirit fell upon me and gave me an entirely different way to understand this. And what I learned in that communion with Spirit was that there's another way of seeing this. What if the people, even right here in my community, that never come back to church? I hope this isn't true. I am not affirming that. I am knowing that we rise above the 51% of the population, and that we know what to do with our fear. You know, we turn to love, and then it dissipates. It cannot remain in the dark. In the darkness, the light. You flip the light switch, it's gone. But what if the 20% of the people are being called to hold a space in consciousness, to pray and to be still and to know greater truths that will then help other people who are the activists, that are the frontline people, that are protesting, that are hurting and aching, that they are the 20% that are anchoring us in truth and in peace and in love. And so my call to you today, if in any way, when we are ready to do church again, you are feeling even the slightest bit uncomfortable returning to community and gathering in a social way, even though we're going to practice all of the right things. But if you are feeling any sense of discomfort within you, that maybe you are being called to stay home and pray, and to hold that space. We will broadcast the talk. You don't have to miss the message. You can take it in, but you can be the anchor, and that is a good thing. And we will not have a judgment, because everyone has a role. Everyone has a place to be and a place to stand. So do what you are called to do. You know what I've been thinking about? There are ways in which we are absolutely all in this together. And I don't mean any incident. I don't mean any crisis. I mean life. If I look at nature, what I know is I, as a human being, need to breathe in oxygen to sustain my physical body. And when I exhale, I give off carbon dioxide. And then the plants, who in order to breathe need the carbon dioxide, breathe that in, and they process that and they give off the oxygen. And there's something very vital in our partnership. We should not be taking these small things for granted. This is an exquisite example of how we are miraculously created to need each other. And the same is true of our humanity. We need each other. We need those who will take that stirred up energy and go out and stir things up some more. And we need other people to take that stirred up energy and to sit and calm it down. And together we are the carbon dioxide and the oxygen that will sustain all of us. Let me read to you this phenomenal quotation that crossed my life this week from A Course in Miracles. If you wish to understand things as they really are, then realize this: all things must be forgiven first and then understood. Let me read that again. If you wish to understand things as they really are, then realize this first. All things must be forgiven and then understood, because an ancient hate is passing from this world. Look back no longer, for what lies ahead is all that you have ever wanted in your heart. Oh my goodness, an ancient hate is passing from this world. If you have been called to be a placeholder, please hold that place. No peace is possible. If you are called as an activist, please do what needs to be done. Together, we can do this. Number two. So number one, you are a placeholder no matter what your view, no matter where you stand, no matter how uncomfortable any of this makes you feel. Find your place and stand there and hold it and do it. Number two, I want to remind us that we are all part of an unfolding story. It is not finished, and we are all players in it. And that this particular chapter in this great story of life is just a piece of that. So I want us to really recognize all the stories that we hear, and including these luscious conspiracy theories of many varieties. Conspiracy stories are myths. They're myths. They're just like fairy tales, and just like the myths or the stories, the fables that before the written word, travelers would tell when they would camp at night. They would tell these stories because the stories have elements of truth in them. Myth is a necessary part of our advancement. That's why we, in spiritual stories, we look for metaphors that tell the real truths of life that are sometimes we're not able to hear when they're too frank and too straightforward. So instead we have myths. And they help us make sense of the complexities that make no sense. They help us to find meaning in the current story we are trying to live through when we're really uncomfortable because we have no idea where the story is going. And so I would say that, remember, in all stories, there's always a little dark something that happens. And there's a reason for that, because it calls us back to the truth of knowing, do a little storytelling here, that luminous beings are we, right? So when Holmes says that God is an energetic force, as in my opening quote there, we are talking story. Let the force be with you, right? Think of all those great ways that Star Wars and Harry Potter and so many of the essential stories that are contemporary to us now, that our young people are resonating with. They're not doing Bible studies on college campuses as much as they are studying Harry Potter to understand and untangle the same human truths we are all needing to and desiring to embody at this time and at all times. So as stories can lead us to truth, I would invite you also to remember that you are a character unfolding in your very own life. And so, as Emma Curtis Hopkins would say, be sure to choose the character you desire to exhibit. You know, the character traits of your personality. What would you like to exhibit in this great, incredible, changing story of all of our lives? When we're children, the dark frightens us, and we're convinced there's something under the bed. And as the sun comes up in the morning, we're able to look under the bed and see that really nothing exists down there under the bed. But that light is a power for us. In the light, we're not so afraid. So let's know we are luminous beings, and we are called to shine our light, and that we are a part of this great big story. Let's know where we are in it. Let's choose where we are in it. And that brings me to my final topic, and that is that I want to say there are two things going on right now. I think it's really useful. I've been studying this for a long time, and I'm prepared to have conversations with you about it. But there are two things going on, and I don't mean a virus and a race issue. The two things that are happening is that we have a social movement unfolding, and we have a consciousness movement unfolding. It's so helpful for me to look at that, because when I align myself to knowing I'm very comfortable in the consciousness movement, I can stand in spiritual truth, and I can be a wise leader. The social movement is loud and messy and uncertain, and the consciousness movement, when I look at it from that spiritual perspective, is stable and it's certain. It's concrete. But here's what we all need to realize is that these are movements, they are alive, and they are converging. They are new, they are not, they need each other. You know, it's like that, the breath and the inhale and the exhale is important for both of us. And so I realized that, you know, our desire has been our spoken desire. It is in our purpose statement here in this community. We say it every Sunday when we gather together. We say it as a community, but we desire to be part of a world that works for everyone. And we're not willing to set that desire aside. And so, in a way, as I have mentioned before, I believe that we have called this forth because we are living in this time of spiritual evolutionary emergence. And I think this is a beautiful thing. How wonderful that we already know it is done unto us as we believe. We believe in change. We stand for change. And so all we have to do right now is find where we want to stand, where we are called, a divine call. Where are we called to stand? So some of us are, some of us will be out there. Some of us will be light bearers, carrying the torch, the light, helping people see truth, return to truth, to see possibilities. Some of us are the coaches. I like to think of it in childbirth terms, that you train a coach to cheer on the woman in labor giving birth for the birthing process. So some of us are standing there going, you can do this. We can do this. We got this. We have this great force, and keep your eye on the prize. It'll really, really be worth it. So let's keep doing this. And some of us are the heavy lifters. Some of us are the heavy lifters and the worker bees, and if that's what you've been called to do. And others of us are doing a lot of things, including praying and holding that vision and all of the great, deep spiritual work that is a tremendous privilege to align to. So I'd like to close this morning with the closing words that Ernest Holmes used in his radio show in August of 1950. It's a beautiful conclusion. He says, we know that in the middle of crisis, something alive with meaning is taking place. Something vibrant with hope is happening. Something latent with possibility of the future is being conceived. Yes, my friends, yes. People have made a mess of things again in a big way, and people can make it better. And I believe we are making it better. So stay on your high moral ground of possibility and principle, and know that you have spiritual guidance through all of this. And we are a spiritual community that stands in that great possibility, in that willingness to feel the pain and know we are a part of evolving that which is coming. We are helping birth something magnificent. And so just a few words of prayer. I just take a breath and allow myself to recognize that indwelling presence, that which has stirred this minister into delivering this message at this time. And I know and feel the love of God, the full support of this evolving universe, knowing that all of life is created for this very time, for this very work. That we are rising, we are expanding, we are ascending, we are gathering the light workers, and this is the day where we stand united and we have hope. And we do not give up. We stand in our faith. We stand in this mighty truth. We know how to use spiritual practice in our daily work. And we believe in this principled philosophy and spiritual truth that shows us the way. So I bless each and every person doing their part. I speak a word of healing for each of us who is feeling the weight, the heaviness, the sleepiness. And we also know that this is not time to go back to sleep. We know instead that we are waking up, that we will not hit that snooze alarm, that we will do what is called to do and be who we are called to be. Even if we are placeholders, we have important roles. I say thank you, God. Thank you, life, for as we are willing to do this revealing of truth, holding this space of possibility, we are healing not only the world and our physical being and our relationships with our loved ones. We start with forgiveness, then we move into understanding, because an ancient wound is being removed and healed. Thank you, God. Thank you, life. I simply release these words into the law, knowing it is absolutely done. And together we say, and so it is. Amen. 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 Thank you for your offering. And I have one sweet announcement. I've been meeting with other ministers. Thank you, Clyde. And we are preparing to tell you, we believe we're in phase 1 of reopening the center, and we are about to step into phase 2. I'm hoping I'm thinking positively that I will be able to give you a date by next weekend. In the meantime, we are posting this week in our newsletter a survey for you to take. It'll be a Survey Monkey, so nobody will know who said what. It's going to be very short and to the point, and we are asking for your input in the kinds of things we can do to help you feel comfortable when you return. Your visioning committee here at this center has completed 3 weeks of intensive visioning, and we are putting all of this together to have a very beautiful plan. We are also approved by the city to begin painting, so I'm happy to tell you that could begin any day now, and wow, lots to be grateful for. Thank you, my friends. I love you. I love you. I release you to ponder all of this on your own and know you have received a gem, whether you have realized it or not. Use it wisely. That's all. Namaste. And so it is.